Hey, this is Johnny. I'm with the band Nothing More, and you're watching Fight Music.
When did we become these sinking stones? When did we build this broken home? Holding each other like ransom notes, dropping our hearts to grip our brothers' throats.
So far, it's really nice. The catering is many times what I judge a festival by, and the catering was unbelievable. It was probably some of the best catering I've ever had at any festival anywhere. But most of the festival reminds me of European style festivals much more than American festivals, which I guess makes sense with what I'm learning about Montreal, and it's much more European vibe here. Visually, like just the way things are set up, the way things are run, like even the way the tents look, as weird as that is, how they do catering in the artist area. It's hard to put my finger on unless you've been to both. It's just a bunch of little things that seem more European, I guess. I don't know.
When did we build this broken home? Holding each other like ransom notes, dropping our hearts to grip our brothers' throats.
Well, I didn't sing really at all until I was about 20, 21 years old. I started dabbling with it, and it was really born out of necessity. I knew that I loved music with everything in me, and I knew that I needed to do it full time with my life. Otherwise, I just knew that I would be an unhappy person. And so we had been through multiple singers throughout the years, and we had built up a small following regionally and recorded a record with each one of them. And as you know, a record takes a good year or more to tour and really promote and record. And so we had to start at square one with every singer. And so years later, I finally got to the point where, we were at a crossroads as a band, and we were like, we really need to make this work because we're starting to approach the age, where, everybody grows up and, life gets real and you have a lot of bills to pay, and, everyone's been there. And I was tired of my fate being in someone else's hands. And even though I couldn't sing at the time, I knew that I had applied myself to other things and figured my way through them. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to do the same thing with singing. Even though I can't sing, I'm going to figure it out. And the guys backed me up. And it took me a good 2 years to start feeling comfortable on stage singing. It was, my biggest fear in life was public speaking. I wouldn't sleep like all night before school the next day if I had to present to the class. So it's kind of ironic that my life went that direction. Needless to say, I've gotten over that fear. My bass player and I were talking about this last night, about the people that you end up hanging around, and kind of a lot of times you notice there's some characteristics of people that you end up becoming friends with, or, like they say, likes attract in a lot of ways. And we noticed that, like, within everyone, I think there's a survival instinct that's like primal and just is there biologically to literally get through anything to survive. And I think in the modern world, we don't really need that instinct in the same way. But there's some people who still have that instinct turned on. And it can go very awry if they don't channel that instinct into something productive and positive in the world. Otherwise, those people end up being very unstable, actually. They're like a very hyperactive rat in a cage kind of a thing, and they end up doing crazy shit and, hurting other people or becoming violent. So for me, I always found my outlet through, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and music. And fortunately, I think that same instinct was for me, it's always been turned on. Like, I always have to be doing something, and I always have this angst kind of boiling in me, and that's why I was attracted to heavier music, stuff like that. So that drive and that feeling that at times felt like a curse, I've learned as I've gotten older to channel it. And so I channeled it towards singing, and it was, in a way, a survival. It was total necessity. Something had to work, and there was no other option. There wasn't another singer out there, and so I knew I had to make it work somehow. And so I just turned that instinct on, and just, like, I don't know. For me, it's always been a source of great energy to just pour into things, and it ended up working. So it's interesting to look back on. It was right at the tail end of middle school, but I really got into it in high school. I don't know if it's because I was a firstborn and I had 2 sisters, and so I was always kind of the odd one out. And being I guess a firstborn, a lot of times your parents treat you a little differently, like be an example to the other kids, or don't do that because they're watching you. So they kind of almost condition in you many times like an independence or like a leadership role or whatever as a kid. And so I was always attracted to doing something a little more independent. And so I played a lot of team sports, and I liked them, but there was always a part of me that just wanted to go mano-a-mano, you know, one-on-one. I didn't want to rely on somebody else screwing up. It's the same thing that led me towards pursuing music rather than going somewhere else where the path was a little more certain. I like relying on myself figuring it out. And so with jiu-jitsu and wrestling, or wrestling first, at a young age, I was always smaller. You know, I'm only 135 pounds, so I'm still very small for an adult. But I always watched, you know, Ninja Turtles as a kid and Power Rangers and like anything with fighting. For some reason, I just was attracted to it, and I think a lot of younger boys are. But as I got older, because of that independence, I always wanted to find something that I could do on my own. And it's kind of funny, but being a drummer, it's the way in which you use your mind, which is multiple limbs at once, and the challenges that come with that is very similar to wrestling. Like, you have to be constantly cognizant and aware of each limb and how it can be attacked and where your weaknesses are, and you have to be able to move multiple limbs simultaneously to maneuver certain things. So I was just naturally attracted to it, I guess. I'm still pretty new to it. And I'm so I want to get back so badly, because I've been on the road for the last year and a half, 2 years, and I've barely gotten to do any jiu-jitsu. Just every once in a while, on a day off, I'll find a dojo in town and go train. But the jiu-jitsu was just taking it to the next step, really. You know, when UFC took off, that was I was pretty young when that happened, when it was going through its infancy, I guess, in like the 90s or early 90s or late 80s or something. I was still young, so I didn't know anything about it, but it really started taking off. Like, my wrestling team and I, before, like on the weekends before meets and stuff, we'd watch UFC, like, pay-per-view as like a team, you know, pump up kind of a thing. So I was introduced to it through wrestling, but then jiu-jitsu, I've always been attracted to grappling more than striking. For multiple reasons. The main reason is it seems a little more, to me, and this may be totally speaking out of turn to anybody who's a striker, because I don't mean any disrespect, but with grappling, I feel like there's a little more room to win against a bigger opponent if you are smaller, and that suits my body type. With striking, I feel like the bigger, stronger guys, faster, bigger, stronger, is always going to win. So jiu-jitsu was the natural thing for me, and plus I'm not dealing with, you know, a lot of breaks or head injuries like striking oftentimes, you know, has. But I do want to learn more striking, but I want to get a really solid jiu-jitsu foundation first. There's a singer in a band called Everybody Panic. They're out of Oklahoma City, and I met him on the Five Finger Death Punch tour because Zoltan from Five Finger Death Punch is he rolls, and he would always bust out these mats backstage before the show and would be training with his trainer, John. I'm blanking out on his name, but he was a black belt that went on the road with him. Great guy and great instructor. Anyway, one of the shows that I got to roll with them, Ty Gay is his name. He's a black belt in Oklahoma City who's also a singer in a band, and we just hit it off because he knew our music, and I was like, holy shit, you're a black belt, like, I would love to train sometime, or, you know. So I went to a school when we were in Oklahoma City, you know, a few weeks ago, and just some of the best instruction I've ever had. So it's cool to come across people every once in a while, but for the most part, it's not super popular. Oh, Trivium, the band Trivium. I saw him practicing while I was sound checking. He was up on a second deck, like with one of his buddies, and I was so jealous because he had somebody on the road that trains with him. I don't have that. Nobody in my band is into it at all, and if somebody's just not into it, it's a weird thing to try to get somebody to grapple. You know what I mean? It's just totally uncomfortable unless they get that world and are into it. So my dream items, I have a rock and roll dream list of, you know, things to attain or check off a list, and that's definitely one of them. I have to get my wife out on the road first. Oh, she would kill me if I took a black belt on the road before. You know, as much as I want to take a black belt out. So I got to get her on the road, and we got to, you know, grow a little bit as a band, have a little more room for people and a little more money to throw at stuff like that. But yeah, totally going to do that eventually. Because of my wrestling background, really, that and my dad, when I was younger, was kind of the one who introduced me to how to properly exercise. And you know, as a kid in middle school, it's, you know, just skinny everything, which I'm still skinny, unfortunately. I haven't really filled out, but you know, he was just like, give me these tiny weights, and he's like, this is how you do a curl, this is how you do a push-up, you know. And so I was very thankful for my dad growing up, but also wrestling taught me you know, just how to do very basic, fundamental body weight, you know, push-ups, crunches, pull-ups, like jump squats. Like, that's the stuff I usually do. I rarely have the chance to go lift heavy weights or be at the gym very often because of my lifestyle and schedule. But man, it's just the basics, again, like pull-ups and some gymnastic exercises. You know, if you watch gymnasts and they're on those poles and their legs are like the perfect L, stuff like that. That really, it's great exercise, man. I think there's two sides to it. I think one side is that a lot of fighters that come out of the United States were people who would be into fighting, would probably be naturally attracted to wrestling at a younger age because it's available at schools. You know, jiu-jitsu wasn't available, and neither was boxing. So to be able to do it at school and then go into college and do it, I think is probably the reason most fight-minded kind of people end up being wrestlers first. But on the other side of that, I think the wrestling, because of the way it's set up, the rules and your goal, which is, you know, pinning or getting points, even though there's disadvantages to being a wrestler when you first start learning jiu-jitsu or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, it's like you have some holes in your game because you're not used to, you know, I would shoot in all the time and leave my neck wide open. And since then, I've learned not to do that, and I've had to carve back some of my habits from wrestling that don't apply anymore because of submissions. But what I did have from wrestling was you get such an increased level of balance, and your base in body awareness is so strong because you're forced to, whereas in jiu-jitsu or MMA, a lot of things that you go for may end a lot quicker because of a knockout or a submission, whereas in wrestling, you're forced to keep pushing and keep fighting even though when you're so tired, because you're not going to get knocked out or submitted. So I think there's something to the nature of the game being the way it is, that it forces people to just get these incredible sense of base and balance and strength because of that, I guess, quality. But yeah, I went to a wrestling camp growing up, and the culture in wrestling is so much more hardcore than the culture in, say, jiu-jitsu is a much more laid-back culture. You know, because it was made for the weaker opponent. It's not based on speed and strength like wrestling. Wrestling's all about speed and strength and technique, and so it's just different in that way. And I think that works better when you're in an environment where people aren't wearing a gi or clothing. I find when I fight bigger opponents, you know, in grappling, it's much easier when there's a gi because I can tie them up and I don't have to use my strength as much. But when it's body to body, like MMA style, that weight means a lot more. And so the wrestling background gets you used to that, you know, which MMA is about. So I went to a small private school, and the wrestling program there was nothing to brag about in regards to all these other schools who had these legendary programs for years and years and were state champs, you know, however many years in a row. We were nothing, but our coach was crazy. Like he felt like called to that school. You know, he was on like that. I don't even know how to describe it, but to give you an example, after the program that we did with wrestling with him, he was a judo, black belt in judo, and also he almost went to the Olympics for Taekwondo originally, but just got into MMA and started doing cage fighting. And soon after the program, he went to the Sudan to just fight these people that he felt were being oppressed by Muslim extremists. And so there's pictures of him with a machine gun. He's the only white dude in the bunch. Saw all these Africans with him. He went to Brazil after that to join the, I think it's the BOPO or the BOPA. It's the police that goes into the slums. There's like all this slum warfare that we don't really see in our news over here. But he'd go into the slums of Rio de Janeiro and take out all these drug lords and whatever. He got involved in that and has pictures all over his Facebook doing that. And then he went to Korea to be a part of some. So he chases wherever there's violence. And because to him, he's one of those guys that feels like our culture's super soft and weak now. And so so that gives you a picture of what this coach was like. And he one day he pushed us so hard, and I was just a sophomore in high school, you know, soft ass kid. Not I didn't have a hard bone in my body until after this. And we were late, and so he made us run the gauntlet. Of course, I had to wrestle everybody fresh, I remember, until I puked. And then he made us run 10 miles, and we never ran. You know, I mean, we did exercise, but we didn't run. Ran 10 miles, and that was, I just remember puking a lot that day and almost quitting. I was like, I got sick a lot that year because he pushed us so hard, but I did learn a lot about myself. Just want to tell all of our fans hello, and thank you all for being as cool as you are. We definitely see the messages and stories that a lot of you share with us. We don't have the time anymore, unfortunately, to respond to everything like we would want to, but just know that we do read it, and I see it, and it means a lot to me. So thank you all.